Hi everyone, my name is Daniel Golant. I'm a New York City-based software engineer. Welcome to my talk for SLOconf 2023, Seeing Like a State, SLOs and the BigCos. Alex proposed a loose subject for this talk a few months ago online, namely, how do C-suite executives see SLOs? And I was immediately reminded of James C. Scott's 1998 book, Seeing Like a State, and I wanted to explore the idea. Scott's book centers on the idea that governments over the last few hundred years have strived to improve the societies that they serve, but have fallen into sort of traps around what they do. So what does it mean to see like a state? Scott's key idea is that governments function on a principle of legibility. Legibility can be thought of roughly as amenability to abstraction. How easily can we abstract this? And Scott's entire thesis is that basically governments since the, let's say, 18th century have strived to work in larger and larger layers of abstraction and standardization that, while they may yield more efficient outcomes or may at some level improve desired traits in society, also gloss over sort of the individual situations that make individuals, communities, and countries themselves unique and maybe not amenable to such abstraction. The key example that Scott offers is 18th century Prussian forestry management, in which the Prussian government, a German state, a pre-German state, attempted to increase their timber output in order to capitalize on the rapid industrialization of the continent. Now, the way they did that is they created this strategy called scientific forestry, which basically seeded forests in nice, neat little rows. And while very organized and legible, glossed over all of the things that make forests, natural forests, actually function. The flora that support the soil cycle, the fauna that might carry seeds, from place to place, and even human interactions like collection of fruit that might help spur the growth of the forest and maintain it in a sustainable way. The Prussian forestry practices led to forests that within a few generations had completely died out and failed to achieve their increased timber production goals. Many people have obviously pointed out the similarities between states and corporations, and I was curious to investigate whether we can draw some connections about how corporations might fail in their goals in a similar way, where they just function with higher and higher levels of leaky abstraction until the whole system sort of collapses. We can take a look at how this works and how people think of large corporations. So how do people think large corporations work? They tend to fall into sort of two models. One is basically these people are, at the companies that, are venerated, these people are essentially gods among people. They work with tools that have been honed against the very sharp edge of human progress, and therefore they're freed from ordinary concern and can always cast an eye to the horizon and never fail to make the correct decision. The other perspective is basically these companies are slow, haltingly competent, and basically only get by on incidental success historically that has meant that they can paper over all of their problems with money. This was initially supposed to be a sort of humorous talk, so I will warn you that we will be diving into the second conception, and while I don't agree with it, I do want to investigate it specifically because I think it's kind of not coherent. So let's take a look at how the second sort of company might deal with service level objectives. We'll cover position 2 mostly because it's funnier, and we're going to pick on Mark Zuckerberg a little bit because I think he's the only interesting personality at the heights of tech. So we open on the interior of the Meta office. We see, soft light flooding the room, motes of dust in the air, and there's a singular figure sort of standing with his hands behind his back in front of an incredibly long conference table. The room is brightly lit, but everything is dim in comparison to his glowing red eyes. Mark Zuckerberg is ready to issue a new edict. He's had some success with these edicts before. They've led to a lot of success for the company. In the past, when he's told everyone, we must maximize bad vibes in society, it has increased engagement for his platform. Subsequently, when he told everyone, we must interfere in the 2016 election, that also led to increased engagement on the platform. And so now Mark is ready for the future of his company, and he opens his mouth and he says, we must plug everyone into the matrix, hoping that it'll increase engagement on the platform. Immediately, alarms go off across the building, and the executives who've been standing just off screen this whole time start running around, sending Slacks, asking for meetings, and communicating these new priorities down to their teams. At every layer, a leader receives the new priorities, turns to their laptop, immediately pulls up the promotion guidelines, writes a plan with the goal of maximizing their probability of receiving and exceeds expectations, and communicates their plan down to their team. This process continues until we get to a level of leadership that has service reliability on their performance packet criteria. There are roughly 20,000 managers at this layer. Each one of them starts to think, how can I meet my service reliability goal? And they go to Google and they Google service reliability goals. They copy and paste the first result and they lightly edit it. And what they get is all services must meet an SLA of average latency below 500 milliseconds for all requests related to the matrix. All services must have 5 nines of availability for all requests related to the matrix. As they finish up their memo, they paste it into ChatGPT, getting the grammar and details correct, and then they fire it off to their reports. They then kick up their feet and decide to reward themselves with a 2 p.m. matcha latte for a long, hard day's work. Their reports receive this email, take a moment to read it, silently weep over the politicking they'll have to do around these clearly nonsensical goals, and turn back to whatever they were doing, knowing they'll really not have to change much because free money will mean that they will hit their service goals even if 40% of pods are constantly thrashing. Sounds a little silly when we say it out loud, right? Let's be clear, large companies have flaws and they sometimes operate in nonsensical ways. But that being said, we're talking about incredibly successful organizations employing some of the most sought-after people in the field. They have an incentive to use SLOs properly, if SLOs work, and to not work by this sort of fiat. In fact, in the research that I did for this talk, what I found was exactly that. Companies that hewed closer to the SLO practices that we all know were more likely to hit both the reliability and non-reliability related goals, and less likely to operate by fiat. Let's take a look at what I actually saw when I talked to some folks. Basically what you'd expect. Everyone I talked to described roughly some sequence of the following, which is that they rank their user journeys, they figure out the SLIs around those user journeys, and then they set their objectives. They communicate their plan upwards, they get feedback, they tweak their plan, and then they implement it. If services experience, a lot of problems, at some point executives do take a look at whatever, SLOs they have set, but generally teams are left to do what they, are entrusted to do otherwise. Obviously, company cultures differ from company to company. Some are more consolidated versus some are more conglomerated. And obviously teams that maintain, mostly platform-like services versus teams that maintain more product-like services, the first might monitor every request at the request level rather, and the latter might monitor at some higher level sort of abstraction like ad placement if they're an ads team. But basically what we find is that these companies aren't working with a different set of tools than you or I, and also they're pretty good at it, particularly if they follow the plans as we know them. We devolve control, we trust people who know what they're doing, and we look at outcomes rather than processes. The one thing I'll say about the fact that, most people I talk to, the closer they hewed to what we read in books, the better they performed, is that, success can only be measured in the context of the political and economic moment that we're in. In my opinion, software engineering is sort of the intersection of like macroeconomics, microeconomics, and computer science. And let's be honest, the macroeconomic environment has been letting us off pretty easily for about the last 15 years. Now that things are changing, I imagine a lot of the engineering truisms that we've sort of all accepted might change as well. Now that, an additional layer of reliability, a marginal machine, is no longer effectively free, right? That's all we have to say on that. So, what does this tell us about SLOs? Well, historically, governing bodies have tried to rule from the center by standardizing the way they deal with resources. This standardization is effectively impossible at certain levels of scale, and they've fallen into what we've called the legibility trap, dooming their efforts to fail. What we found in speaking with teams at various large tech corporations is that teams with better reliability outcomes tend to implement SLOs properly and start from critical user journeys, moving outwards towards objectives. To me, this highlights an under-discussed political aspect of SLOs in the sense of politics being a way to organize resources and people towards goals. They are not only poorly compatible with rule by fiat, they're actively a tool against centralized control. If you're doing SLOs properly, the team decides the standards they want to set, given a set of expectations from the parent corporation, and when that approach succeeds, it actually decreases the corporation's interest in interfering with the team's autonomy. They essentially act, SLOs, as an interface between a local team and their parent corporation, allowing the corporation to define the desired outcomes without any concern for implementation, similar to an API, and then let the team worry about the rest. SLOs are a lever towards improving your whole company, leaving executives to worry about things that matter more to them. After all, if you're trying to increase timber outputs, you don't really care about the layout of the forest. In this way, we can see SLOs as a template approach to solving the legibility trap in both very large corporations and potentially in governments themselves. What might similar approaches look like in other contexts? I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for joining me. My name is Daniel Golant. I'm a New York City-based software engineer. You can find me online at the following places, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day.